yourself and your kids become trauma-proof and trauma resilient. We'll be answering questions like, do traumatic events cause trauma? What's the difference between a stress reaction and a trauma response, and why does it matter? How does one heal from trauma? How do you know if a child needs therapy for trauma? And so much more. Parenting really affects us to the core of our being. So if you're feeling this weight on your shoulders, you are not alone. And now you will finally get some well-deserved guidance on how we can navigate these challenges in a productive way to bring us closer to our children. Make sure to stay on until the end, where you will hear about this one-time chance to join Sarah Chana week after week for a live full program at a special discounted rate just for attending today. Plus, we had so many questions come in ahead of time. And as I mentioned, feel free to put your questions in as well throughout today's class, and we will do our best to answer as many as possible live on the line. It is truly an honor to be hosting Sarah Chana Radcliffe today, a registered member of the College of Psychologists of Ontario. Sarah Chana Radcliffe has been practicing marriage, parenting, and individual counseling for over 40 years. Sarah Chana is a well-sought-after lecturer on stress management, parenting, anger management, and emotional well-being. She is the author of Raise Your Kids Without Raising Your Voice, The Fear Fix, Make Yourself at Home, and 5 other books on family life and emotional well-being. Sarah Chana, we are so grateful that you are joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and pass the microphone over to you. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much. Okay, I'm very excited to take on this topic because I really think that certainly every parent needs to know what trauma is, what trauma isn't. It's a big word for all of us these days, and uh, s- it's funny, we've kind of swung from the olden days when nobody acknowledged any kind of psychological syndromes. Everybody was just ordinary neurotic, let's say. Like we were known as human beings to have our difficulties and to just plow through life trying to get over them. Some of the biggest traumas in history were never identified as traumatic events that would cause any kind of psychological fallout. And nowadays, everything is considered to be traumatic. Life itself is considered to be traumatic. And this actually affects our own adult ability to cope with difficulties. And it certainly affects our parenting, how we're going to help children through their challenges. And it affects children. Okay, so it's affecting everybody. The idea that trauma is now seen as hiding and lurking, we might say, behind everything. A bad mark, a moody teacher, a nasty friend, a rejection. Are these things traumatic? How would you know if they are or they aren't? Because as we're going to see, really almost anything could be traumatic. Okay, so I'm saying some things which are normally thought of perhaps as bad experiences, like unpleasant things that happen to us. And life being what it is, um, there will be many, many bad experiences that happen to children, teens, and adults every day. And when does the bad experience become a traumatic experience? That's what we want to look at right now. And I'll invite you to ask some questions about this after. But right now, we'll just say that anything potentially could be traumatic, and I'm going to explain why. So, first of all, bad things happen to children, teens, and adults, to everybody at every age and every stage of life. And we want to know, when is a bad experience just unpleasant, and when is it a trauma that requires special trauma toolkit interventions, and what would those trauma toolkit interventions actually look like? So, okay, I'm just going to turn off everything. Okay, now, the other thing is, if you happen to be a parent, okay, and you're wondering about how to help your kids through trauma, the question will be, how will you cope with your child's with your child's traumatic difficulties? So a suffering child, even if it's just that the child didn't get invited to the neighbor's swimming pool, hurts the parent very often. what about a traumatized child? How will you function as an adult parent trying to help your kid when you see the child has been hurt? So there's that special element also. How do we hold ourselves steady if it turns out, in fact, that our child is experiencing trauma? This is something. So there's our personal traumas, and sometimes the things that happen are going to affect the whole family. So it could be, I'm going to name some scary things, like what do you call that? Trigger warning here, but I'll say some things, like let's say a family home being on fire. So, that would affect the adults who own that home, and it would affect the children who sleep at that home and consider that their home base for security. And then the parent will also be seeing that the child has been affected, and it will affect how the parent um, holds herself steady through the parenting in order to help the child. And the parent is also traumatized. And we see this in events also like divorce, where the whole family is affected. And different family members, all of them at different ways, might experience something that we call trauma. Now, trauma, is a word that we associate with houses on fire and big things like divorce and death and illness. But as I mentioned, it could be that the kid next door isn't inviting your child to the swimming pool. So actually, I'm going to put this out to you for a minute. Could you write down right now in the chat box, what do you consider to be traumatic events? Okay, why don't we just start with that? Could you do that? Take a look in a minute. And you could write it down from the point of view of what's traumatic for a child and what's traumatic for an adult. Sometimes they're the same.
We have people writing divorce, abuse, war, parent suicide, sexual abuse, death of a sibling or a child, anything that makes us feel unsafe, bullying, constantly belittling, mental, emotional, and physical abuse, collectors coming to take the family car and furniture. Mother was sick with breast cancer for over a year. Death, assault, home breaking up for any reason, moving location, siblings, emotional and physical abuse, global events such as the war in Israel. A lot of people are writing bullying, daughter being dumped by friends, an accident, an illness, parents fighting all the time, learning disabilities and in the wrong school, emotional neglect,
Oh, you guys
embarrassment.
are fast with this. Like there's no shortage of like ideas coming in, right? I'm sorry to
Yeah,
cut
no,
you
it's
there. Is there
true.
more? Because these are all these are all great. Is there more there, Jillian?
Yeah, feeling betrayed, witnessing mental illness, anytime one experiences fight, flight, or freeze and has to get regulated, overdose, constant criticism, an incident that violates our safety or sense of self, well-being, or normalcy. And then there's a question just, can a child be born with trauma?
So interesting. I just want to give you an answer on that last question first. Yes, trauma is passed through genes. And if you just think of things like certain animals, for example, that are born skittish, like rabbits, right? So, like rabbits are hunted and killed, they are called prey animals. And we see this in other animals as well, that when their ancestors have been, chased down en masse, the babies are born with the tendency to fear everything and everyone. And there are books on children of Holocaust survivors tracing genetic consequences for the children, not just the environmental consequence of living with traumatized parents, which is a whole story by itself, but also looking at the epigenetics of this. So yeah, that's a good question. But what I see is that you've named all sorts of big events, that have be noted for their capacity to induce trauma. And I want to put it that way because it turns out that it's not the events that cause trauma, but some events have a greater likelihood of triggering a trauma syndrome within a person. And trauma syndrome is, we could call that a trauma response or a reaction to a traumatic event. And the kinds of things you mentioned are, pretty big, devastating, life-changing events. Some of them are one-time events. Some of them are prolonged over a period of time. Like, let's say a car accident would be a one-time event, which could cause a trauma response. But the criticism thing, chronic criticism for 20 developmental years, is a very long-term um, trigger that could trigger a trauma response in a person. It's going to be a different kind of trauma response. We're actually going to really pull it apart in the course on trauma that follows this, so that we'll really have the most in-depth understanding. But for now, we're going to say that a one-time trauma can produce a traumatic response, notably a syndrome called post-traumatic stress disorder or stress disorder. In the short, we can have an immediate response also, which is just maybe going to last for a month or so. Um, or we can have chronic developmental things like living with an alcoholic parent, dealing with a messy divorce for, 15 developmental years, things that go on and on and on, which create different symptoms and affect usually the whole personality, the relationship profile, the emotional well-being and mental health uh, trajectory. So we're going to look at all of that. But yeah, those are like the ones you named here are the ones we think of. But how about the kid not being invited to the neighbor's swimming pool? Um, could that be a traumatic event? Let's say the kid, you're living beside those people for several years, okay? And your daughter is the same age as the kid next door who invites her buddies there, and your daughter is not well liked by the kid next door, and she is not invited, but she has the experience of listening to the kids splash in the pool summer after summer. Could that be a trauma? Do you want to just put what you think in the box?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Definitely. Yes, a small trauma, especially for an anxiety-prone child. Yes, definitely. Depends if the situation is ongoing in other recurrent situations. For a child who already feels excluded in life, it can definitely be a trauma.
So you got some
Depends.
cool.
Oh, sorry. It's interesting. Depends on the adult reaction.
You guys are saying true things that are very true, all of those. You're saying, well, potentially, depends on a few things. So in the other ones, um, if you're in a car crash, is that by definition a trauma? Whereas if your next door neighbor doesn't invite your kids to the swimming pool, is that potentially a trauma? If yeah, what would you say about that? Like, is the house on fire always a trauma, whereas rejection might sometimes be a trauma? What do you think?
Yes, agree. Um, Not by definition, depends how it affects a person. No, depending on the resilience of the child, depends on the child. Attitude can make a big difference. I think it's whatever triggers your nervous system.
Okay, you guys are well informed on trauma because you're correct. There's actually nothing that is inherently traumatic. It's so interesting. But it depends here on our definition of trauma. So there are obviously horrible events that happen. Okay. If you're in a devastating car crash, if somebody was, heaven forbid, injured, sent to the hospital or killed in that car crash, if you were going through a war, if there was a volcano that erupted and sucked up half your town, or a tornado that ripped off, your parents' business, like all the glass is shattered, everything's destroyed. There's lots of horrible things that can happen. And the how do we usually feel? Let's say if these things, like let's say we're going to take something that's not what we don't think the trauma we think of as life and death, okay? And in fact, encoded in the DSM-5, which is the diagnostic manual for diagnosing mental health disorders, including trauma disorders like post-traumatic stress syndrome, which we'll talk about in a minute, but that's considered a disorder. Um, It talks about being involved somehow in life and death situations, either as a participant, somebody had a gun to your head and entered your house, and somebody entered the house, put a gun to the people's heads, and went and robbed the house and then left. So everybody survives. Would we expect everybody to be traumatized? 'Cause maybe we would think like, well, I would be, having a gun pointed to my head or watching my kid having a gun pointed to his head. Because we might think, yeah, I would be traumatized. But then people answered here, well, actually, it depends even then on the child's personality, maybe on the child's life history. Is this a kid in a war-strewn country? I don't know, there's guns all around all the time. Is he living in a neighborhood where there's a lot of violence and people are seeing guns all the time? Is this a kid who's been very sheltered, who never saw or heard anything violent in his life, and this is what's now happening on his little, you know, protected boulevard there? All of a sudden, bad things have happened. New people have moved in, and they're not so nice. Like, what, what, uh, what's the background? What's the situation? What's the history? What's the personality of the kid? So that might cause or not cause, lead or not lead the child to a trauma response. Okay, because um, in parenting and in ourselves, we don't need to fix anything if nothing's broken. And just because something bad and horrible has happened actually doesn't mean, by definition, that we're going to have a trauma syndrome. And just because something kind of ordinary happened, like being socially rejected, that doesn't necessarily mean that we won't have a trauma reaction. So, really, the thing we need to know and to recognize is what is a trauma reaction. We don't need to know the names of bad events. Okay. So we have put events out there in this list where we think that those events would cause a lot of people to then have trauma reactions. Okay. And it's true that some of these events are more likely to trigger trauma reactions, but not in everybody. But it's going to be very hard to tell. And as a parent, if you're not seeing a trauma response in your child, then there's actually nothing for you to treat. Now, in the DSM-5, which I alluded to a minute ago, the only trauma response that's in that diagnostic manual is a delayed response to a traumatic event. The P in post-traumatic stress disorder means that there's a stress disorder that comes post-trauma, after the trauma happened, not while the trauma was happening, and not even close by to when the trauma was happening. And post-traumatic stress disorder responds to refers to a response that kind of sinks in a little bit later. That's what the P stands for. So it could be more than a month later, it could be 2 months later. If something bad happened to the kid, and 2 months later, the child is having symptoms, or 2 years later, and 2 decades later, or even 4 decades later. That is what post-traumatic stress disorder refers to. So what it means is that um, the child got out of the trauma experience the moment, I don't know, the car crash, the whatever, these bad things that happened, the plane crash, whatever happened, a subway crash, and you all got out, everybody's safe, and the kid looks fine. Okay. If the child looks fine, we actually don't know whether the child is fine or not. We, you know, it could be 50 years later that the trauma response is triggered by going on some underground, railroad. Maybe after that subway, the person moved to a town that didn't have a subway, and so the whole thing was never triggered again by anything. But then was traveling somewhere and went on an underground train track, and then the whole thing came back. Okay, and the person's now having a full-blown panic attack and trauma response. Trauma is weird that way because it can lie dormant. So were the parents supposed to do something? Because the event that happened, they were on a train, the train crashed, people were screaming, there was chaos, there was sirens going off, firemen entered the scene, there was water, I don't know, whatever. Picture the chaos, okay? But the kid comes home and just tells everybody about it. Oh, wow, I was on this train with mommy, and this is what happened. And whoa, and the kid looks all excited about it. Does the parent assume that there will be an underlying nervous system disruption and pull out her trauma toolkit? Or does the parent go like, phew, he seems fine. He seems like this is a great story to tell. He's posting all his pictures on his social media account or whatever. He's writing an essay on it at school. He's telling everybody he knows, but he looks happy and he's sleeping well, eating well, and bothering his siblings as usual. So, like, phew, he's okay. Tell me, what do you think? Should the parent assume there's something lying dormant, or should the parent assume he's okay? Mhm.
Looks like people are saying assume he's okay, assume he's okay. Don't assume, but address the feelings to give him awareness and tools. I'd assume he's okay. I would think it doesn't hurt to give some intervention without making him feel like it's a big deal. No, definitely need to tune into his cues, assume he's okay, but monitor the situation. I think I see only one person say that possibly it's dormant.
Mhm. Um, so somebody mentioned in the earlier question that whether a kid will experience a trauma response sometimes depends on the adult reaction. So you can imagine, I mean, he's with mom. What if mom's freaked out? What if mom has had a history, biological characteristics, a temperament, something that has led her to be easily traumatized or just more traumatizable, okay? So, and she's crying, "Oh my goodness, get out of here, the train might explode." I don't know, that she's falling apart, okay? So that can actually help foster a more problematic reaction in the child. But let's say mom had the same personality as the kid and goes like, whoa, I can hardly wait to tell dad about this when we get home, and she's kind of like the kid. That might impact the child differently. And again, we're going to look at all these things in more depth later. But for now, we'll just say that this kid, he looks fine, like nothing's bothering him. And and we don't know if anything will ever bother him ever in his life about this. And somebody answered here, it wouldn't be bad to take a little bit of preventative steps from your toolkit. And I would agree with that personally. Without making a big deal, the person said, I would agree with that because there are certain things we can do to help reduce the likelihood that there will be a post-trauma syndrome later. Now, a lot of what leads a kid to have a response to trauma, and a response to trauma is one that affects the person physically, disrupting their rhythms like their sleeping and eating patterns, possibly. It affects them emotionally, causing them to become more anxious, fearful, possibly more have a kind of phobic reaction or panic attacks. It can lead to nightmares and a great desire for avoidance. Okay, like the child or the adult may be like, I'm never going on a train again. Okay, I was on a train, it crashed. I'm never going on a train again. Right? So sometimes we get a reaction like that just from eating a food that was bad. And we were in a restaurant, we had dinner there, we came home, we vomited all night, never going to that restaurant again, or never eating that dish again. That's actually a bit of a trauma response, okay? Because something happened once, and now we're basing the rest of our life decisions on it. Okay, so that's and avoidance is a very big trauma response. Now, another category of trauma responses are behavioral. So avoidance is behavioral, but we might see in a child who's having a trauma response, changes in their bodily symptoms, meaning maybe they need to run to the bathroom 100 times a day now. Maybe they can't sleep well at night. They're having nightmares. They can't fall asleep. They're having insomnia. They want to sleep with mommy. Or they're now fighting with everybody, or they're crying all day. Something has changed emotionally, behaviorally, and physically. That is a trauma response, a trauma syndrome. And interestingly, 80%, right? This number, yes, 80% of people who experienced what we would think of as traumatic events, a traumatic, um, I'm going to say not just single events, but even a traumatic childhood. 80% of people who come out of that actually have no trauma response. And this is a really interesting statistic because it means that all these horrible events we're talking about, including um, marital conflict, watching even marital violence in the home, going through messy divorces or not messy divorces, but there's the whole trauma of having the family split up, moving many, many times, or having financial difficulties, as people suggested in that long list. There are many, many hard things that children experience. So, um, and we have experienced in growing up, and we continue to experience as adults. We can have a traumatic birth experience that it was a, felt like a near-death experience for us, or something went terribly wrong, or it was exceedingly painful and very difficult to recover from. That's a traumatic birth experience. We have the trauma of being married, but marriage is often just a plain traumatic experience for people if we include all of these emotional difficulties that do happen. So our children are having bad things happen, including unfair, mean teachers, perhaps a special needs kid in the family, who's sucking the life out of the family, maybe a dangerous kid in the family, like all sorts of things, okay? Um, or just the normal struggles of living, of not doing well in school, being at the bottom of the class, or not being in the class, or the school that's right for you, as people were suggesting, lots of different things. But our normal response, and one that is characterizing 80% of the population, is that we are unhappy, troubled, bothered, and miserable about these unhappy, troubling, and bothering things. But we're not traumatized. Okay, so now I want to make sure you're following along with me here. Put in the chat box, when is a traumatic event? When is it actually a trauma for us or for our children? Okay, so when I'm going to say traumatic event, any of the things that we just named, all that long list, when are those called traumas for you or for your child?
When there's a trauma response, when we
Yes,
feel or they feel stuck, when you feel alone and not supported. Many people are writing when there's a trauma response.
that is the answer.
Great.
We'll just stop it right there. That is the answer. It's not a trauma unless there's a trauma response, trauma symptoms. Now, if the kid has no trauma symptoms from a very bad experience, that doesn't mean he's not going to be bothered terribly by the bad experience. For example, the kid with the neighbor next door, she may be very unhappy that her classmates, her friends, her neighbors are all swimming and she has been excluded. But you can picture a kid having no trauma response to that. It's like, mom has said some people have problems, like even if that kid next door doesn't like her, if she's inviting every other child in the neighborhood, this is like having a class party, inviting every kid except your child. Okay, this is like there's something wrong with somebody who can't overcome their feelings enough to behave properly and to include everybody, right? So maybe mom has given that lesson to her child, and her child is resilient genetically. She doesn't have any um, genetic inborn vulnerability to low self-esteem, to taking rejection very, very hard. Because some of us do. For example, there's a rejection sensitivity that's had this be noted within ADHD for many people. I think I can't remember if they call it plain rejection sensitivity, but it's been noted that there's more a likelihood of being hurt by other people's just bad behavior, stupidity, and consideration or humanness than other people who are more like Teflon. It's just like, okay, yeah, she's an idiot. Like, whatever, like this, I'm okay, she's not okay. That position you can be born with. And the other one, I'm not okay no matter what. You can also be born with that one. So we call that a genetic vulnerability. So we might have a kid who's rather hardy on the genes, who has an emotionally intelligent parent who has given guidance, and the mother's not reactive. The mother's not on the phone all day long calling the next door neighbor's mother and saying, your daughter is traumatizing mine. Okay. The mother is not conveying, this is a disaster, this is a tragedy, this is overwhelming. And so the child is not picking up, oh, I'm supposed to be overwhelmed, traumatized, or whatever by this rejection. So, yes, the parenting thing, and that's again what we're going to be unpacking in the follow-up course here. What is our parenting strategy to help prevent trauma from setting in, let alone what do we do once it has set in? Okay. So trauma can be defined as something, an event, an experience, or an ongoing experience that overwhelms the child's ability to cope such that it results in some sort of unhealthy change biologically, emotionally, perhaps cognitively, and behaviorally. Cognitively, now we're talking about cognitive distortions, the way we see the world as an unsafe place, a not good place, a place full of danger. Whereas we are living in a world where bad things happen. That would be true. And our assumptions of safety or of goodness are going to be shattered probably early on in childhood. Like, it's not like if you have loving parents and a great home, you may think as a kid that the world is rosy and everybody's nice until you go to a store and one of the people who work in the store starts yelling at you because you're a 5-year-old and you've touched something and something because you're like all of a sudden you're like, Mommy, he yelled at me. And you're like, for the kid whose parents would never yell at him for something like that. They would just say, like, sweetie, move your hand away from that. We're not supposed to touch. Our assumptions that the world is safe, always good, always loving are going to be shattered long before we get out of childhood. And then shattered again and again and again. But when we're having a trauma response, we then generalize to the whole world is to be mistrusted. Everything is now tainted with danger and this overwhelming feeling. Our whole reaction to life is altered biologically, mentally, emotionally, behaviorally. So that is a trauma response. And it's always going to be unfortunate for us if we have one of those things because we're not going to be enjoying our living experience as much as we should be. Okay. So we want to get out of the trauma response. Unfortunately, even post-traumatic stress syndrome is something that is open to change. It can be rewired even if we're having a very intense trauma response. So let me just say for 1 second. I want to mention, I'm just going to read here. I wrote a list. I just spoke a lot of symptoms out loud. I'm going to read the list I wrote of common indicators that a trauma response is occurring. But I do want to give the caveat that after something really scary happened, like you were in that train crash or you saw, even a kid can watch a very scary film, okay, and be traumatized by just watching it. Um, One time I was in a public library with my kids when they were little, and the film, a Disney film called Bambi, I don't know if any of you know it, it's very old, from the 1950s or something, about a deer. I can't remember the thing. All I remember is early on in the movie, Bambi's mother dies or gets shot by a hunter. Bambi is a deer, okay? And now Bambi's an orphan deer. I remember one of my 4-year-olds was sitting in the group of children watching this movie and suffered trauma from that movie, okay? Because and I'm sure any of you have had the experience of a kid reading a book, hearing about something that happened to somebody far away. And by the way, this can happen to adults as well. I heard that somebody got kidnapped, chopped into little pieces. I don't know the person, and it's far away in another country, but now I can't sleep. Okay. That's a trauma response. But sometimes what happens is a trauma response may last a few days and then go away, never to be seen again by the parent or never to be experienced again by the child. So it's a lot of things spontaneously heal. And again, it's going to matter how we intervene, whether we might accidentally prolong or build a trauma response, or whether we're able to actually prevent it from growing, building, and enduring. So, not that everything's in our hands, but there may be things that we can do that kind of shift it one way or the other. So, these are some trauma type symptoms. Um, we have intense and ongoing emotional distress. So the kid can't stop talking about what happened, or is now very, very sad and disturbed, has having an altered mood, or extreme anxiety, or guilt, or upset, anger, sadness, these types of changes. Or the kid has now kind of behaviorally regressed, doesn't want to go to the house, doesn't want to leave you, is standing by your side, even though he's 15 or whatever, or he's acting out in a behavioral change where he's now uncharacteristically miserable or angry or destructive. Um, he's having trouble in school. If he's in school, he can't concentrate. He's failing tests that he's used to get A's on. The teachers are wondering if he's okay. Um, he can't sleep, as I mentioned before, the nightmares, the falling asleep, the waking up early, the needing to sleep in your bed or with you, staying close. Sometimes loss of interest in life, in his friends, in his hobbies, his normal activities. Sometimes the endless talking or playing out, replaying the trauma. Hypervigilance, a very noticeable startle response, jumping out of your skin. Um, Increasing relationship problems, even with friends. Weird new things like behaviors, especially you might see in teens. All of a sudden, a very ordinary, well-behaved, well-socialized kid is doing things that nobody like her would do. So, she's vaping, but this kid would never have done that. Or she's cutting, self-injuring, and you discover that like completely out of character, or experimenting with alcohol. Those are all actually coping mechanisms for overwhelming feelings inside that the kid is trying to manage, but we might see it. Um, or express, or just, all of a sudden the kid is talking about or showing that they just don't feel part of the world anymore. Those are just some, okay? There's lots of things. Now, interestingly, no one of those symptoms indicates a trauma response. So we want to just file back here that the kid could be cutting, not be, for other reasons, okay? Although cutting as a behavior is associated with a trauma response, it's not only coming from there necessarily. And certainly insomnia and nightmares following, the death of grandparent or something could be a trauma response, and we might think it is, and we should probably act as if it is, if you know that's something that is normally going to cause a disruption of anybody's nervous system. The death of a loved one, it's something like that, okay? Like if it's a loved one, everybody's nervous system is disrupted, or even while the person is, if you had some warning that the person was dying, in other words, it wasn't a sudden accident, but they were sick, everybody's nervous system is disrupted. So if there's something like that happened and the kid is having trouble in all the areas that I mentioned, we're going to guess that it's a trauma response and treat it accordingly. But I just want you to understand that becoming suddenly anxious is not necessarily a trauma response. So you have a kid who is like behaving absolutely normally and all of a sudden is freaking out at school about something. Um, there are things, especially in teenagers, that are sometimes just genetic. For example, symptoms like OCD, becoming obsessive, and actually developing a whole syndrome, an OCD syndrome, could be triggered by the intense, overwhelming experience of some negative experience, a trauma, okay, traumatic event, okay. On the other hand, it can just show up for no reason at age 12, 13, 14, 15, whatever it is, because it's one of those things that sometimes a kid, you see it in a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, but more often you see it come out of nowhere in childhood, in the teen years. So we don't want to just assume that strange symptoms always point to trauma. And I think that in our culture today, there is an error going that way, that we say, like, well, if the kid has changed in these areas, emotionally, behaviorally, cognitively, whatever, she must have been traumatized. I say, no. There could be other reasons why that is happening. So, and we don't want to give the wrong intervention, for a kid who needs help. So, we can explain that again more later. Okay. Um, all right. Let's just see. Bullying, I'm just looking at my list of things. This is kind of going back a bit, but could these things be traumatic? A kid who's being bullied at school, this is similar to our rejection at the swimming pool, is, a car accident where nobody was hurt. It just went boom, but nobody was hurt and the car wasn't totaled or anything. Uh, being homesick at summer camp, is that going to be a trauma? Moving to a new country where you don't speak the language, an amicable divorce where the parents live a block away from each other and everything is okay. Again, the thing we're looking for is, well, is the child having symptoms? That's what is going to define it as traumatic for the child. The event itself could at most be one that often triggers a traumatic response. So we can't look at the event and say it's a trauma. So divorce is not a trauma, although divorce can be one that often triggers a traumatic response. Not always. Some people live very happily with no traumatic response to divorce. Okay. And the ones I said here, moving to another country could be an exciting thing, and the kids could all adapt quite well. In some cases, they could have a traumatic response. Okay, sleepover camp, being homesick. In some cases, that's just a bad experience. Okay, and it has no lingering effects. The kid will go to camp eventually, maybe in a year or two, try again, or the kid comes home and is happy and has no further symptoms and manages to separate, leave home, have a totally healthy adjustment at the right time in the right place. It was just not the right time for this kid. So it's not necessarily that and when the kid comes home, he's not having nightmares about this experience or anything, no traumatic response. But in some cases, yes, the kid is now just stuck to you for a long time and is having a traumatic response. So we are looking not at events and saying hurricanes are always traumatic. No, sometimes yes, sometimes no, but often would trigger a traumatic response. More often, let's say, than somebody not being nice to you at school. Okay, somebody not being nice to you at school is a unpleasant, bad experience. Okay, nobody likes that. So there are many things that fall into that category. They don't alter the nervous system. They don't cause nightmares. They don't affect behavior. But they're really unpleasant. And we might feel angry. We might feel sad. We might feel mad. We might feel nervous to be with those people again. But that's just feelings, okay? Negative feelings appropriate for negative experiences, but not trauma responses. So let's just see for a second. Are there any questions that we need to answer here? I just want to pause for a second, in just case, because I'm
Yeah, I think that I just see people being eager to know, so what can we do as parents at this point, once we see our children exhibiting symptoms?
that's a good question. Okay. Okay. Um, so I'm going to say here that's very important to be grounded ourselves, right? Remember I said a little bit back there that our hysteria and our pain over the child's pain can be interfering factors. So when parents really obviously get upset about a wrong that's been done to their kid, I'm now talking about the swimming pool incident, right? Or other not nice things. Your kid wasn't included. Your kid expresses upset about that. Now, upset is the normal reaction to being excluded. Feeling hurt is the normal reaction to being excluded. That's it, it hurts, okay? Trauma is not the normal reaction to being excluded. But if the parent wants to blow this up real big, what? They did what to you? This is completely unacceptable. I'm calling the parents. I'm calling the school. I'm calling the police. Whatever. You're like, I'm going. This. We're not going to let this happen. This is totally, totally wrong. And the kid's looking at you, going like, "Oh, um, I guess my upset is validated first. We want it to be validated, okay? And I guess it's justified. And I guess I should be even more upset because look how upset mom is. Like that can happen. So we need to be grounded. And we also need to have faith in the human child's ability to deal with bad experiences. When I say bad, I mean, nothing's bad. Everything God does is for the good. But I mean, it feels bad. It feels horrible to be rejected. It feels horrible to fail your test. It feels horrible to try so hard to get into your professional school or the yeshiva of your choice or whatever it is you're trying to get into and not get in. Many things feel horrible. What the parent needs to have is faith in the child's ability to feel horrible and then move on. This is called resilience. And even if the parent never recovered, the parent needs to have faith in the child's ability to recover. Let's say that there was this, experience in childhood before the parent suffered as being a little bit chubby in childhood and having a mother who didn't get it and was very critical of her chubbiness, and then being mocked at school. Some bad experience, somebody whispering, laughing, whatever it is, or making an actual comment about how fat she was or something. And this was the mother's experience. And the mother experienced it as traumatic because she wasn't helped through it. Her own mother was part of the problem, and her experiences were not modified in any way in a good way. And so she came out traumatized, meaning she had lingering lifelong pain and body image issues and is extremely, to this day, now that she's 40 years old or something, still hypervigilant and monitoring her body and very, very oversensitive to everything to do with appearance. And her kid is a little bit chubby, okay? But her kid has the father's gene, and her child is much more resilient in every way and is confident and happy and feels good about her body. And she's living actually in a time period that's a little bit different. She's not experiencing the kind of traumatizing environment that the mother grew up in. But one day the kid comes home and says something that somebody made a comment about how the school uniform doesn't look good on her because she's heavy. Okay? That's And the mother's trauma prevents the mother from reacting normally. So now the kid wasn't going to be traumatized by it, but the mother's reaction could be traumatizing. So we want, first of all, for the mother to remember, my experience isn't my kid's experience, even if I was traumatized by something. That's number one. Number two, for the most part, children are resilient. 80% of children 100% of children experience horrible events that could be traumatizing, and even horrible events that are frequently traumatizing for people. And 80% of those people are not traumatized. So if you think, what's the chance that my child is going to be harmed by any particular experience? The chances are much higher that the child will survive the experience completely intact and remember it as one of those crummy experiences, like a not a good experience, like it was a bad time. It was hard. It was painful. I was sad, but I did not have a trauma response. Okay. It didn't alter everything in my nervous system. I went on, lived a good life, but I don't remember that summer very fondly. That was really bad. That is a typical normal response to bad events and the more likely one for your kid to have over any bad event. So if you are actually aware of this and your kid made this comment like, wow, she said that my uniform didn't look good on me because I was fat, and the mother's remembering, most people survive this, and says, well, how did you feel about that? And the kid says, I thought she was a moron. I mean, who says things like that? I mean, she can keep her thoughts to herself. And anyways, I like the way it looks. And the mother says, great, end of conversation. And if the mother is triggered and needs help to work through what really happened on the inside for her, she can call her therapist and clear it up for herself. Leave the kid alone. Okay. So if the kid said, well, I felt really hurt. I felt that, I mean, that was really insulting. I mean, do I look okay? I mean, do you think I need to lose weight? So now the mother has another challenge here. Now she sees the kid's pain, right? In the first example, the kid didn't exhibit any pain. We want to just leave the kid, all right? In the second example, the kid is hurt, but we don't know about any trauma syndrome. And hurt is a normal emotion. So the parent can validate that, like, yeah, nobody likes to have people say negative things about how they look. I wonder how that kid would feel if you say that her hair was frizzy or something. I mean, that was, that is hurtful. I can understand why you didn't like that. You didn't appreciate that. So the mother is validating the hurt and not suggesting that the kid is going to fall apart, or this is overwhelming, or this is a terrible, terrible experience that needs adult intervention. In fact, kids need to survive hurt again and again and again to know that, yeah, the world is a good place, but people are often unkind, insensitive. They say things that could hurt. But overall, people are great. Okay, like this is the downside of people. If you're going to spend any time with people, if you're going to look for it or harp on it, you will see that people miss the little sensitivity, the little nuance of nicety that they should have said, and they're blunt or they didn't realize what they were saying. They didn't mean anything by it. So people who focus on what we're calling just a couple of years ago microaggressions. We don't hear anything more about it now that the world is completely at war. Nobody's talking about microaggressions anymore. But not noticing or making little digs or just not being particularly sensitive or emotionally intelligent causes people to say a lot of things that could be hurtful, right? So we say like, yeah, she didn't know what she's saying, you know, and the mother validates that it was hurtful, but then downgrades it about how hurtful this could be. The mother's actually providing some um, information here that can help the child. It's like, yeah, people say things they don't know. They should filter their mouth. Sometimes they say things without thinking about it. She probably didn't mean anything too much, or she's just thoughtless. I don't think she's, but yeah, I can see why you not appreciate that remark. And then the mother goes on with life, indicating that I'm not going to lose any sleep over this, and neither should you. Okay, without even saying that, or you could say that, right? Um, Now, this the kid says, yeah, but she's always making these remarks. Okay, she tells me I'm stupid. She tells me I'm fat. She tells me this and that. And then the mother can give the kid tools. Really? Well, why don't you ask her to stop like speaking to you like that? Like nobody has to put up with that. Just tell her, like whatever. The mother can tutor the kid through how to deal with this rude child or how to avoid the rude child or do whatever's necessary to live in the world with this rude child. Again, there's no trauma response because we are not assuming that any particular event is a traumatic event. The most it can be is an event that often triggers a trauma response. Okay, that's the most it can be. And and bad events are not in that category. Bad events are normal life things that almost always trigger temporary pain and then the person moves on. So we're thinking in our mind resilience. Okay, we're thinking that our kid can survive being angry, upset, hurt, living in a world that's unfair, not always kind, and so on. And we expect the kid to survive it. When parents don't, and there was this a shift apparently in the 1990s in the parenting style that a lot of people were doing, that was called in general safetyism. And it started off with physical safety. Let's get rid of all the dangerous things in the playground because we don't want to get the kid stitches at the hospital. So it started physically, but it did move to emotional safetyism. Nobody should ever say anything not nice because my kid will be traumatized. That is actually not true. The kid needs to be inoculated against things that are not nice, meaning survive it and come away with enough confidence that, well, you think this, but I think this. Or I observe that you're not very tactful, and I'm okay, and I'm allowed to be fat or whatever. I don't, it's too bad you don't like my hair or my eyes or my body shape or whatever it is. Like, it's none of your business, and you should keep your mouth shut. To teach a kid to like identify where the problem is, and it's not in us. But this needs adults to help educate the child about what bad behavior and bad experiences really mean. That was scary. That was hurtful. That was upsetting. Wow, that was unfair. And then get on with your life. Okay. That's really what we want for almost every experience. If there's a trauma response and the kid is now not sleeping, not eating, not what do you call it? Crying all the time. That's not crying. I mean, crying all the time, and highly anxious. And so now we're seeing symptoms. So we're going to try things from our trauma toolkit first. And if those don't work, then we're going to enlist a professional who knows how to get trauma symptoms out of the child's body. And then we're going to have to know what to look for in a professional also, because not all therapists some therapists, like some parents, can make trauma symptoms worse or cause trauma symptoms where there were none to begin with. An example of this is, um, it can happen that two kids are caught playing doctor in kindergarten, both kids 4 years old or 5 years old, with parents who have read a bit too much or know a bit too much and think that, well, let's see. Um, This other kid invited my kid to play doctor. This other kid has probably been sexually abused. Why would he ask my kid to play doctor? Meaning pull down the pants and explore each other's private parts, okay? Why would that happen? So I'm going to report to family services that this kid invited my kid to play doctor. Okay, so that's a very reactive response on a parent's part to assume that the other child had been molested or somehow sexually awakened, and that's why that's why the other kid is playing doctor. That's a bad assumption because 5-year-olds play doctor. So do 6-year-olds actually, and even 8-year-olds are quite curious. There's a lot of misunderstandings about that stuff, which we can take up later as we look in the course on everything around sexuality. But for here, we'll just say that the kid then is investigated by family services, and the family is investigated, and we have the social workers come in with the clipboards and they're taking notes and asking the kid all sorts of questions that the kid doesn't even know what is flying, focusing on all of this sexual stuff. The kid had nothing in his mind about that. He was playing doctor. He's 5 years old. Nothing ever happened to him. Did the nanny ever touch you? Did your brother ever touch you? Did your mother ever touch you? How about your father? Like all these questions can induce trauma. So we don't want to go down that route. We need to know a little bit about normal development and and the chances that people are not traumatized are higher than the chances that they are. Therefore, we're going to lean that way. I can also just tell the kids, stay away from it. Don't pull it down your friend's pants. Okay, we're not doing that. That's going to be a cure for the whole thing there. So um, it's interesting. Some people feel like, well, just because my kid has no symptoms and is not sharing anything with me, doesn't mean that they're not traumatized. That's a whole, like, parents are overthinking about it. If you're not seeing symptoms, we're going to say the kid is not traumatized now. Okay. If something happened that often induces trauma, for example, the kid was at the Shabbos table with everybody, and the grandfather stood up and then keeled over with a heart attack. Okay, traumatizing all the adults at the table. So, and the ambulance comes, and the grandfather's put on the stretcher and whatever. Okay, again, some kid at the table goes like, "Whoa, that was exciting. That was different. That never usually happens." And other kids at the table crying, is grandpa alive? Is he going to die? And so we'll say that watching an event like that, the parent should think something like that has a very high incidence of inducing traumatic symptoms. So after grandfather's gone and everybody's quiet, the parent sits down with the child and talks about what happened. And starting off with naming the feelings, because if the kid doesn't, not all children name their feelings. They might just go like, um, you know, oh, what's happening to grandpa, whatever, and the parent is answering questions just on the technical level. Well, he's okay, but we had to take him to the hospital to have him checked out. Hopefully he'll be okay. The doctor will tell us tomorrow. That doesn't address anything on the emotional level. It's not preventative. But if the parent jumps in here and says, well, um, grandpa's going to be, okay. Hopefully, he's getting some tests. We're going to find out what's from the doctors tomorrow, what they say. But when he fell over like that, that was really scary. I felt really scared. How did you feel when that happened? And the kid might say, I don't know. He's like, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know also, because like it was really surprising, for that to happen when he stood up. It's just like, boom, oh gosh, that really rattled me. But I'm glad now that it turns out that he's okay and he's just resting in the hospital. And the doctors will let us know if he needs any treatment or anything. I think maybe he just fainted. And, thank God everything is fine. He's okay. But something like that to watch can sometimes be scary and upsetting. But yeah, sometimes people trip and they fall. Sometimes people have just a momentary medical crisis. Things like that happen all the time. And usually, it just requires some intervention and treatment. Usually it turns out okay. And thankfully, in this case, that's what happened. So we're talking about it. Okay. Um, there's a tendency for some parents to provide reassurance, and the reassurance can actually feed the trauma. Okay. Because it's as if the parent is saying, don't be scared. Don't be scared. Nothing happened. I promise you nothing happened. Everything's okay. And they're not allowing the child to be scared. So, just for example, the kid is sleeping. There's a big storm outside. A tree hits the roof. Boom! The roof is falling in. I don't know if in the child's room or some other room, but there's a crash, there's a hole. Okay. And the parents are running around calling for help. Fire trucks come, emergency services come, and that's the first thing. And then they look at the roof, whatever it is, and then over the next week, there's all this drilling and hammering and fixing and whatever, and it's a racket. And the kid, mommy, and the kid is, and the parents going, it's okay, everything's fixed, okay, like it's okay. A tree fell in the house, no problem, it's okay. The guys are fixing it, it's fine. Okay, that's called reassurance. And then the kid for the next 6 months refuses to go into her room, has to sleep with mommy, can't fall asleep. Um, and that is partly from the it's okay response. Okay. What the parent needs to do is say, that was scary. That was so scary when that boom went off. Did you hear that boom? It was scary. And let the kid talk about it for a few days. Like, mommy, that was scary, right? When the boom went off. So, yeah, that was scary. Whoa, boom. Gosh, that was so scary. It's good that the guys came and fixed it, but whoa, I didn't know what happened. The tree fell in the house. That's so weird. Like I guess it can happen in a big storm. But fortunately, Hashem protected us and we're all okay. But boy, that was scary. That intervention of combining the normal reaction that we would expect, which is please be scared if you hear a big boom like that and a house falls in. Who wouldn't be scared? We cannot go, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. All right. So these are some hints. We're going to look at much more during the course. Jillian, do you want to take it? Are there more questions now? Whatever.
Yes, we have a lot of
Yeah.
questions coming in,
Okay.
and I want to address as many as possible, as I
Okay.
mentioned.
Yeah.
I would say, though, a lot of people are asking, how do we continue? Because you've touched on so many great points here, and I know that we have so much to come in the full course. So, everybody, hang on here. I will get all of the information to you so that you can register for the course. And while we are accepting registrations, we will also go ahead and address, like I said, as many questions as possible. There are some great questions coming in now. There are some that came in ahead of time. So let me get started on what this full course really entails, what we're going to be tackling and going over. And I will, of course, give you that link so that you can start joining. So what are we going to get? Over the next 8 weeks, we are going to really get into much more depth on trauma. So, session one, what is trauma and who gets traumatized? Understand what trauma is and what makes one child more likely than another to suffer long-term effects from traumatic experiences, understanding trauma responses. And again, I saw so many questions coming in about this. So Sarah Chana touched on that today. And again, lots more depth. Learn about the different types of reactions that children can have to traumatic events, ranging from temporary shock to chronic lifelong symptoms. Learn how to identify when therapy is and is not a recommended intervention. In session three, we're going to be talking about parenting, attachment, and trauma. Sorry. Oops. Oh, I just lost my thing. Hold on a minute. Sorry about that. Oh boy, here we go. Okay. Trauma recovery, understand and utilize your pivotal role in your child's response to traumatic life events. Session four, understanding changes in your child's behavior. Learn to recognize trauma symptoms, triggers, and coping mechanisms. Followed by behavioral issues, acting out withdrawal and self-harm. Learn how to recognize and respond appropriately to changes in behavior brought about by traumatic experiences. Session six will be professional input. Learn about appropriate and inappropriate treatments for trauma and what to look for in selecting professional help for your child when necessary. And finally, 2 full hours, sessions 7 and 8, of question and answer and practical implementation sessions. This is a chance to get all of these questions answered and make sure that you understand how to implement all of the tools that Sarah Chana will be sharing. Each ongoing class will be live and interactive, allowing you, again, to get your questions answered and stay completely anonymous if you choose. They will take place on Thursdays at 12 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Israel time, and our first class is starting next week. But don't worry, if you can't attend a class live, a recording will be available to you in your own personal membership area every Sunday after the live class takes place, and you can listen to or download that at your convenience. You'll also have lifelong access to the course, so you can listen and re-listen as you like. Plus, in addition to the 8 full weeks of live classes, you'll also get the 8-part series on getting on the same parenting page. This marriage workshop will help you discover how to empower each other by having one another's backs and work as partners during critical decision-making times. Plus a sibling relationships course. You'll discover how to set your kids on the path for a successful adulthood by learning how to successfully negotiate with their siblings. And finally, a full course on uncovering happiness. In this 5-part audio series on uncovering happiness, you'll discover the best path for your individual journey to overcoming disappointment, sadness, and feelings of hopelessness. As you can see, Sarah Chana will be walking you through various aspects of parenting, marriage, and emotional well-being to ensure that you and your family are set to thrive. You'll have one-on-one support throughout the program and will have the unique opportunity to get your questions answered that you haven't been able to get answered previously. So let me just get here for a minute. By joining, you'll have, again, the 8 full weeks of live classes, recordings available of all weekly sessions in your own personal membership area, a full course on getting on the same parenting page, sibling relationships workshop, and uncovering happiness workshop. You'll have notes and homework for immediate application. And again, personal membership area where all of your materials and classes will be accessible. An opportunity like this rarely comes along, but we've listened to our members over the years and we found your perfect mentor in Sarah Chana, and we are offering the guidance you need and deserve for a highly reduced rate. So I am going to get you the links. For our basic package of the full 8 weeks of live classes, just $297, plus there are payment plan options available, or you can become a platinum member today for just $397. And you'll get the 8 weeks of classes plus all 3 bonus workshops. But as I mentioned in the very beginning, for attending live today, there is actually an additional bonus for the first 10 people to register for the basic package and the first 10 people to register for the platinum package. You will get an additional $50 off while you join right now. We're still on the line answering questions. Those first 10 people, it'll just be $247 for basic, $347 for platinum. So grab your spot while you can. Go to jewishworkshops.com/toolkit. I will go ahead and put that link right here on your screen for you. www.jewishworkshops.com/toolkit. Hannah and Sephora are also here on the line with me. If you have any questions, please come back to this chat box and put your name and your telephone number. They will be happy to answer any questions or help you register over the phone. And Hannah, if you could actually just put that link into the chat box as well to help people make it easier. You can just copy and paste into another browser while still sticking with us and listening to the Q&A session that's about to begin. And once you're in, if you could just come back and let me know, I'd love to be able to welcome our brand new members. I'll also be able to let people know where we stand with our first 10. So if there are still some spots left, that would be amazing. Just come on back when you've registered and write the words "I'm in" with your name or your initials, and I would be happy to welcome our brand new members. Let me get to some of these questions because there were so many. Sarah Chana, I'd really love to be able to tackle as many as possible. Let me see here. All right. We are a family of a soldier that was in the thick of October 7th, and it's had a big impact on my other children who are 17 and 13. Isolation as they have no one around them who had siblings in the war, and we are in America. And as parents, we have worked through most of the issues, but understanding how it affects my kids is critical. How can I start that conversation?
I'm just interested here in you're saying you want to, they haven't come to you to talk about the whatever it is they're feeling. So, or I'm
That's
going
what
to,
it sounds like,
yes, I'm
correct?
going to make that assumption. Okay. So we'll just say that they haven't expressed worry directly to you, and you want to start a conversation with them. So again, having a sibling in active combat where we know people are getting wounded and they're getting killed is one of those things that has a likely outcome for many people. Not all people, but for a lot of people, that's going to be a trigger for a trauma response. So as long as not a trauma, I just want to fix that for a second. What we have here is if heaven forbid anything happened, that would lead to a trauma response. However, what we're talking about is a scary situation where nothing bad has happened. We have a brother who's a soldier. So in Israel, of course, everybody's a soldier. So everybody's going off to war, and that's just normal. And the whole population does have more trauma responses because actually bad things do happen to more people per square inch over there. But in being a soldier is not by definition one of the things that causes the trauma response. Now you're pointing out that here we have an isolation thing, like I can't talk to everybody here. And this is one of the things that actually does help prevent trauma responses, which is that we're not alone, okay, that you have other people who are going through it. So and this is why, because if we look at Jewish trauma history in general, as I said, rabbits are prey animals. Jews are also prey animals. They've been hunted down since the beginning of time. And we have a long, long history of severe traumatic events. So the question is, are we all traumatized? I mean, are we all having trouble sleeping every night because of that? Or are we all having emotional problems because of that? No, we're not. We're actually thriving. We're leading very successful lives en masse. And if we look at what has helped Jewish people on whole not suffer debilitating syndromes as a result of being hunted down, being tortured, being killed, being involved in wars. I mean, more often we're not even involved in wars, we're just sitting ducks, victims. If we look at it, some of the things I'm going to say here have also relevance for your particular situation. One is we have not community necessarily up and down the street, because we could be living as a Jewish family in some place where there aren't any other Jews, but we would still have community if we follow Judaism, because let's say we celebrate the Jewish holidays. So we have Hanukkah, where they tried to kill us and destroy our religion, and Purim, where they tried to just please kill us and destroy our religion. Pesach, where they enslaved us and tortured us and didn't let us go free and tried to kill us. Tisha B'Av, which is the holiday that celebrates the beginning of the torturous period of whatever, right? So our community, our awareness of who we are, includes a conscious acknowledgement that there is huge risk in being a Jew. Okay, as a community, we're not alone or isolated from that, and that each one of us is always at risk, and especially with anti-Semitism, which is open and in the open and rising, we have that available to us also to enrich the community aspect of acknowledging that bad things happen all the time, and that we are, in general, protected by God, and that our people is protected by God, and that there's meaning and purpose to being a hunted Jew, that we're actually giving an education that inoculates our people against being absolutely a pile of messy victims, like completely brain dead, because we've been nothing but chased down. And even our daily prayers talk about this in the book of Psalms. Well, it's all about, David HaMelech, King David being um, chased to be murdered all throughout the book, and how his best friends betray him. We're not hiding out in a world where it says that everybody's good, everybody's nice, everybody loves us, you just be good and good things will happen to you. We're not hiding out there. And this provides an inoculation actually against trauma. So, like, yeah, of course they're anti-Semitic now. It says in the Haggadah, in every generation, they're going to try and knock us off. So that actually helps us. We're ready for it. So take your 17-year-old and 13-year-old, and you can point this out to them that, Jews have always fought to survive, walking with Hashem, protected by Hashem. We're a proud, victorious nation. We do not have victim consciousness. We do not experience a self-identity of helplessness. We not only survive everything again and again, but we rise and we lead the world. Okay, like the whole identity thing is communal. It's religious. We're not alone or isolated, and you can bring that to your children. I think that would be a good place to start. Not only that, but we're exposed to the concept of evil, of bad things happening, of suffering, of trauma, of good guys and bad guys. We're not caught off guard. Our world is not shattered. And we pray to Hashem, the one who has all the power to protect our specific loved ones through this, but to build up the courage in your other kids. I think, bigger picture, healthy attitude will go a long way. Okay.
Thank you so much. I thank you. I really appreciate that. And I do see some brand new members who I just want to welcome and then get to some of these other questions. So welcome Esther, welcome Bracha, and welcome Sarah. If there's anyone that I missed, please come on back and just let me know with your name and the words I'm in. Oh, welcome BE. Wonderful to have you as well. We are definitely getting through as many questions as we can, but we're also going to be short on time. So please come on back. Let me know that you're in. And if you have more questions, please come on back and put them into the chat box as well. Again, if you need help registering, please make sure to put your telephone number right here in the chat box so that we can help you register over the phone and answer any questions you may have. Sarah Chana, how does one overcome childhood trauma, especially when we are, especially when I am constantly in contact with the parent who caused my trauma?
So I'm going to assume here that you mean you actually have a trauma response, meaning maladaptive emotions, cognitions, and behaviors. Because I just want to say that most people who've had terrible experiences growing up in a home with parents who argue, parents who are critical, parents who fight with each other and with their kid, and who beat up the brother and everything else, most of the people who come out of these environments do not have a traumatic response. They don't have the cluster of symptoms, which we're going to look at actually in the extended course, that happens from what has been called complex trauma or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll just say here that that is a controversial diagnosis in and of itself, referring to the difficult experience of growing up with um, problematic parenting, which could include immature parents, self-focused, narcissistic parents, and borderline parents, or just ordinary parents who have no skills and they're yelling and they're screaming all the way through parenting, or fewer parents these days are physically aggressive, but some still are. And at least an awareness of that has covers the culture where you can be arrested for being physically aggressive to your children. But people are still screaming, insulting, diminishing, and giving the child a very bad experience growing up. And even though that can be very painful, and we don't even like the person who has done this to us, whether that's our mother or father or both, and we don't want to deal with them anymore, it doesn't necessarily produce a trauma response that goes through your nervous system, your character, your personality, your life choices, and so on. Now, it might have. So, like I said, we're going to look at what the sequelae are of growing up in a difficult home. Um, because that's a really complicated topic by itself. And some people don't want to have much to do with parents who were so hurtful to them, and they kind of just see them and have minimal contact with them. If the parent is still abusive, still hurtful, still dangerous in some way, then there are rare cases where just not seeing the parent is actually what needs to be done. That's usually rare because when we grow up, we're not in the trapped and helpless position that a child finds himself in when living in the home of a parent who is doing terrible parenting or modeling, emotional, impulsive, irrational, and destructive style of living. So when you're trapped as a child, it's overwhelming. You can't get yourself out of there. You can't drive away because you're 8 years old, whatever it is. You can't call the police. You can't do anything, and you're trapped. But now, as an adult, you don't have to see that parent frequently if you don't want to, right? Or now, as an adult, you can actually instruct the parent that they need to be better behaved. Not like that. We have to do it in the right way, halachically speaking, respectful towards a parent. But you can get across the idea that if we're to spend any time together, it has to be that you're not screaming at me, because I'm not going to come. As an adult, you can drive, you live elsewhere, you make choices. So these things, part of the treatment and cure for trauma responses that have happened is to actually update the psyche that the child is no longer living in the home and is free now to take more control of the situation, is no longer a victim. Children are true victims. And this does lead to the trauma response that we see in adulthood, which we will discuss. So, without a full answer, I'm just going to say part of it is calling the shots on your own life right now. Okay.
Thank you so much. And can you just address how to tell the difference between a trauma reaction in a child versus a child who is just dysregulated for a different reason?
Yeah, that is a great question because it is so important that we do differentiate a trauma response from dysregulation because there can be sometimes temporary dysregulation or extended dysregulation in a child who's gone through a trauma. Let's just say, at a very unfortunate case, where the child's parent has died, and in the weeks and months following this, the child's behavior has changed. The kid was compliant. Now the child argues with everything, fights with everybody, doesn't listen, has become aggressive, and obviously has experiencing a personality change, accompanied maybe with some other biological changes that indicate that the parent's death is most likely the trigger for these changes. Okay. Without a known trigger, there's certainly no reason to assume that emotional dysregulation is caused by trauma. That's what I was saying before, that people have gone overboard with this, that all acting out, what it looks like acting out, actually is emotional dysregulation. Acting out means acting out feelings that I can't express, which can happen when a kid is being traumatized, that they're overwhelmed on the inside emotionally and they're acting out the distress that they feel inside. If you know there was a traumatic event, like the death of the kid's parent, then you can assume the most likely explanation for this, and especially if it was a behavioral change, the kid wasn't like this before. This is a trauma response. The way we handle it is very important, okay, and not what you might think it is. And we will cover that in the course. I'm not going to talk about it now. It's too important. But the if a kid has always been, since age 3, emotionally dysregulated, we're not going to assume that something terrible happened to him. It's probably his genetic thing. He may have ADHD or some other kind of syndrome that contributes to poor impulse control or excessively aggressive nature, temperament, whatever it is, genes. We're just if he's always been this way, there is no reason to assume. It's mostly the change, the sudden change that would be give you a little like this is unusual for this kid. Now, sudden change can also come from medical disorders. It can come from substance abuse. It can come from other things, not just trauma, which is something I was also alluding to earlier. That we don't, if you don't know that the kid's father died, we like, what change? What was the trigger? Okay, we need that piece here, okay, before we make any assumptions that current, even if it's a change, the change is not always because of trauma. It could be because of something else. Emerging mental health disorders. It could be a post-viral syndrome. It could be a lot of different things. So um, we'll look at all of this. But in terms of the big difference, one is that there has to be a change, and two, there has to have been something that would likely cause it that you know about. Okay. Could there be secret things? Could it be something in the background? Yes. But that's not going to be our first guess about this. This will be our last guess after we've ruled out more normal causes through a medical examination, through perhaps some counseling process, through many different things. We're going to get rid of obvious explanations for a drastic behavioral change. I'm only talking about like a really noticeable behavioral change. Okay.
Thank you so much. Sarah Chana, is this course only for parents, or would it also just help an adult heal on their own from trauma or be able to also
There'll be enough
recognize?
information here that we'll use it for ourselves quite well as adults. So I do want to make sure that parents, one of the major focuses of the course is helping our child through trauma. But I will constantly reference our own traumas also, and even if you just listen to what we do for a child, it will be very similar for what we need to do for ourselves. So I would take it if there was no children involved, I would recommend the course.
Thank you so much. I just want to go ahead and welcome Esty, and sorry, where did that one go? And welcome Karen. Wonderful to have both of you as well. Please, again, just come on back and let me know when you're in so I can welcome you too. We do seem to still have spots left in those first 10, so you will still get an additional 50 off if you go and register now, jewishworkshops.com/toolkit. And we do have some great other questions that, again, I'd really like to try and get to right now.
We have about 5 minutes.
Sarah,
Yeah.
yes, let me get to this one as well. What should parents do to support their kids if they have the trauma that the kid is experiencing themselves? Like if a parent had been attacked by birds and now the child is afraid of being attacked by a bird, how can the parent stay calm in that moment when their response is um, wants to
I mean, a
be its
short
own
answer
trauma?
on this is that there are parents who have their own anxieties. For example, fear of lightning or something, and they know how much they suffer from this fear of lightning. It's just a phobia. It's not a traumatic response. Nobody ever got hit by lightning. Nothing bad ever happened, but they have a phobia of lightning, let's say. And now their kid is in a thunderstorm in the house, but outside the lightning is going crazy. The parent is dying 1,000 deaths on the inside. Um, there are people who have told me that they are very good at faking a response for their child. Okay, that they go like, "It's lightning. The noise is loud because the air is combusting or whatever it is, and the lightning, it's not going to hit anybody. Even if it hits the house, it would just like go through the telephone lines or I don't know whatever explanation for lightning. Okay." the parent is able to give that information and fake being okay with it, okay, for the child's sake. So some people can do that. On the other hand, some people won't be able to do that, even with a phobia. For example, a mother who has a spider phobia and sees the spider crawling up the kid's leg, and the kid starts screaming, "There's a spider on my leg," But the mother is hysterical. Okay, let's say so, like, she's like, and they won't be able to stay calm enough to say, "Okay, honey, just swat it off," like they won't be able to do that. So the um, in that case, the best service we can do for our children is to actually get our symptoms treated so that if we're not good actors and actresses, that we can be there to help our children more successfully on their journey. Because we can never tell when a child might experience, it depends what kind of trauma we went through, whether we went through something that's pretty common in terms of, you know, I'm going to say, oddly enough, various kinds of sexual abuse are quite common. So if you went through that and never got that straightened out, um, that's the kind of thing that can come up very commonly among children. It's like some huge statistic, 2 out of 5 boys, 3 out of 5 girls, whatever, have some experience with sexual something. Okay. So it is particular, like having a bird do something damaging to you might be one in a zillion. So you don't necessarily need to worry, will this happen to my child? Probably not. Okay. Like, but something like sexual traumas, they're very common. So if you could take care of that professionally and get yourself in a position where you're actually able to talk about everything without being reactive and overwhelmed yourself, that would be quite the gift to your child.
Thank you so much. Someone else just asked if the course would also be good for therapists to take.
Yes. Yes. I have things I want to say to therapists. So, yes, I think that you can help so many more people after you go through the course. So, absolutely, please come.
Wonderful. And sorry, there was one more over here that I wanted to make sure we got to. Um, oh, what was the difference, or is this course, I guess, more helpful than sitting and reading a book? Why would, like this be something that somebody would take versus going to the, bookstore and grabbing something on trauma responses?
I mean, we like to learn in different ways, first of all. So some of us will want to hear it on Audible, not even read the book, right? We want to hear the book. Some of us really like to read a book. Some of us love to hear and be part of a discussion and have our questions answered, which the book is not going to, the author is not going to communicate with you. And in the discussion from other people and other people's questions, which the book doesn't bring forward either, there's new angles that are explored. So these are just different channels, and people prefer different channels. I usually like to take the book, hear it on Audible, and read the book myself. I like to do all of it. I don't know. I think each one has got its special add-on for us. So yeah, it's really personal preference. There's lots of books on trauma, but when you learn it from me, I don't have a book that I wrote on this, so you're going to only be able to learn it from me in this format right now. So that's it.
Thank
Very,
you. Let me
very
just go ahead and welcome our brand new members, Miriam, and welcome Linda. Um,
like
sorry,
that.
one more here. And welcome, Chaya. If you are still on the fence and need some help or asking questions, you need a payment plan that best fits your needs, please come on back and let us know before we sign off with your name and your telephone number. Again, Hannah and Sapora are happy to give you a call when we're finished with the session to help you register, and you'll still get that additional 50 off. And I just want to say, I know that there are so many more questions we didn't have a chance to touch on, but that is what we are creating this course for, so that you can come and walk through step by step where Sarah Chana will address these questions, most likely in her content itself. And of course, you'll also have the opportunity to get your questions answered in those 2 full-hour live Q&As, all dedicated to helping you implement the tools you're about to receive and also getting those questions answered. So I would certainly urge you to come and register if you haven't yet. And Sarhana, with the few minutes that we have left, I'm going to just turn it back to you. I know that there are some people here who are on the fence, who know that this is something that would certainly help them, but maybe, haven't quite made up their minds. So I'm going to turn it back to you for just the last few minutes.
Okay. I mean, trauma is inevitable. Traumatic events is inevitable. Having a trauma response is common, and preventing it from worsening or whatever is a learnable skill. So it's kind of like if you're going to be a parent, I would say that you have to take the course. Okay, you have to take some preparation because when you don't, you leave the child on their own, and that can have you to negotiate traumatic responses and traumatic events, and that can be very hard on the child. So it's just kind of part of parenting where you want to know um, how to be of most help. If you have your own trauma, you're not part of you're not parenting anybody with it. You might still be helping other people, because we encounter other people who have trauma. Like you're just our normal responses and how we're dealing with. I think of the people, October 7th. I mean, it's a recent example, but everybody all of a sudden finding themselves in traumatic situations. And some of the stories we heard of people's automatic responses and what they were able to do in the moment to help everybody that they were with. I mean, it's just part of life, I guess, And so we ourselves have encounters with traumatic events. We ourselves want to come out of it um, it's not only surviving but thriving. And there's just a lot to learn in this area. So, I mean, you ask me, I think it's really, really important to that everybody should have some preparation, and we're offering some here if you would like to be part of it. So, yeah, that's what I would say.
Thank you so much. And I want to just thank everybody who is here with us today. Thank you for spending your time here, being so vulnerable, asking questions, sharing experiences, and certainly telling us what was on the top of your mind. Oftentimes we see, some great participation, but today really was one of our best. So thank you to all of you who participated. Thank you, Sarah Chana,
My
for
pleasure.
being here with us. And we look forward to seeing as many of you as possible live next Thursday for the very first session of the full course. Let me just grab Robin here. Welcome. I see that you're in. And with just a few spots left in Platinum and a few spots left in Basic for that extra 50, I'm going to leave the webinar open for a few more minutes. You can still copy and paste this URL so that you can grab your spot as well. Thank you, Sarah Khan. I know you have to jump
Pleasure.
off.
I do have to run. I'll talk to
But
you.
we're going to
Thank
go
you.
ahead and just keep this open for
I
anyone
hope to
who
see
still
you
has
all next week.
questions.
I hope to see everybody there. Have a good
Thank
week.
you. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
As I was just wrapping up, you won't hear us or see us anymore. But if you have questions or need help registering, please come on back to the chat box. We're still here and we're happy to give you a call or answer any questions left in the chat box as well. Have a wonderful day, everyone.